Good morning, Bardstown and Nelson County, and welcome to Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford with you on this very pleasant Wednesday morning. Overcast, but I'll take it. How about you, Margie?
I'll take it. I'll take it for a good long while here, if we can be so blessed.
Well, I can. I certainly enjoy the temperatures.
Yes.
It was about midnight. My dog insists on going out, so I sit on the porch and rocking it, and he goes fights his demons or whatever he needs to do when he's out. I really enjoyed being out on the porch last night. In fact, I lasted longer than he did because he finally got tired and came up on the porch and laid down waiting on me to go in. So. Anyway, we have a very special guest with us. It's been a while since you've been on, Dean, but we got former Judge Executive Dean Watts with us, and Dean, you look like you came in right off the golf course.
That's what Margie accused me of. Yeah, when you can do what you want to do when you want to do it, it's a different life.
Well, I was going to ask you, have you been retired a while now?
2 years. 2 years.
How's the retirement suiting you?
Retirement is good. I miss the action. Mm-hmm. I miss the people. I still stop and see the girls in the office, and I go down the road apartment and so forth. I miss that part of it, but not enough. Missing enough to come back to work. We're only on this earth for a short period of time. Oh. And it is enjoyable to be able to, as the old saying, stop and smell the roses. Mm-hmm. But I do miss the action. And I was talking the other day, and Katie, my wife, said, "You got to let it go. You're not judge anymore." I read things and I talk about it. I guess I must talk about it out loud. How you do. Anyway, I still follow fiscal court, the city. Mm-hmm. Even the little small cities, I read their take from the Standard and your stories about how they're doing and wish them well.
Well, when you dedicated so much of your life to something, I know as a former school board member, in my heart I'm still a school board member, and so you don't get rid of that passion just because you're not in the office.
And I have to fight myself not to get in the way. And it's easy for somebody to second guess somebody.
Right.
And I've resisted that for 2 years.
Well, I know what you mean. And now, of course, I've been a journalist 30 years, but when I left print journalism and newspapers, there's something to be said, and this, of course, growing up with newspapers and in the industry, there's something satisfying about seeing your work on paper. Mm-hmm. And losing that, I still miss those days.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
Actually pasting up the newspaper and the smell of the wax and everything else. It was a really interesting process and a very creative one, especially when I worked at the E-Town paper, the Daily, because every day at 2 o'clock I went to work and we spent that evening putting together a paper from scratch. Of course, the advertising department had their ads that had to come in, and we had to do all the editorial content, which is for the and of course, I think the advertising department considered what we did the junk that went around their valuable ads, which really paid the bills.
Paid the bills, yes.
That's right. So we could never lose sight of the fact that this is a business. I've worked with editors who talk about, well, it's a public service, but I'm like, okay, maybe so. You can say that, but at the end of the day, it's a business.
It is a business, but the public service is so valuable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Unless you've been in this business like I was, you got to understand the print especially. Mm-hmm. Historically, I went back several times with the Standard, and they would let me come through their 1930s, 40s, and 50s mm-hmm. standards and identify something that happened relative to today's times. So that information became very
valuable
to your I guess, project you were working on.
Right.
Right. And in newspapers historically, and I think they still are, that's the historical record. 100 years from now, somebody wants to
Of
know
the
what was
town.
happening.
Yes.
That's the permanent record.
An example of that was, for years I heard that Nelson County had one dry precinct. Mm-hmm. And we found where it was in the court clerk's office, where it was voted on, and how the vote went, but we couldn't understand. It was script, like handwriting. It was done at the top of the page, and you really couldn't read what the amendments, what that said for that particular precinct, which was Chaplin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so we guessed at it, and then I took that information and went to the Kentucky Standard and found the exact article, and it detailed how the vote went. It was overwhelming to go dry.
Really?
In 1936. Mm-hmm. Has not changed since then. It's the only dry precinct in the county.
Right. A lot of people don't even know that there's a dry precinct.
So they, what does that mean for the people in that precinct?
You cannot set up shop and have a mini mart with beer in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There was a guy that tried. He had a winery
in Chaplin.
In Chaplin precinct. Now, obviously, that precinct has changed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In size but the guy tried to open up a winery. Mm-hmm. There was a petition on my desk within a few days. He wanted to sell it on premises. And there were over 240 signatures from that area opposing him selling. Of course, he withdrew then.
Right.
But we wouldn't be able to give him a license.
Yeah.
Because it was a dry precinct. But that Kentucky Standard helped me identify the exact wording on the amendment, or the vote that they made.
Yeah, I just think it's just criminal how so many of these papers are having to close down. I mean, you
people like Jimmy Brooks are putting them out of business.
No.
I've never blamed him for anything.
No, I'm teasing.
No, I wouldn't do that. Now you talk about historical record. For years, my daddy told me about a group of kids from Henrytown, and it was around Halloween, I think, and they were causing some mischief in town. And I think the police chief at that time didn't have a vehicle, and so he was chasing these kids around town. They were like lowering the street lights and doing some mischief. I don't think anything was damaged permanently.
It wasn't any of your relatives, was it?
Yeah, it was my daddy.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. You had that look about you.
And his brothers.
And his brother.
And another group from Henrytown. So, yeah. So, anyway, I got thinking about that one time. I thought, well, I'm going to look that up and see if there's anything in the paper. Sure enough, there was a report about hoodlums raising a ruckus around Bardstown.
Yeah, when he was a young man.
And they think they know who it is, and when they catch him, boy, they're in trouble. So, anyway, I copied that for my dad. And, anyway, he got a big laugh out of it. But my mother was ashamed. She was like, "Oh, I can't believe you did that."
Yeah.
Well, when you're young and rambunctious,
make mistakes.
That's right. All right. Well, Dina, you're with us today, and we've been talking a little bit about county government, and there's been a lot of things that have been changing in county government. And I think one of the things that's kind of surprised me in a way, but in another way not, is the rise in garbage rates. 2 consecutive years with the rates going up. But I understand. I mean, talking to John Greenwell and Brad Spalding, the cost of equipment, especially since the pandemic, everything has gone up. Everything's gone up dramatically. The price of asphalt, and labor in general. And so I think they make a good argument, the need for that. And I think, there's a general argument that, if you have services, they should
pay for themselves. Sure. Yeah.
So I really don't have a disagreement with that. The disagreement I have was that, and I don't know who dropped the ball, or if there was no, as far as unpaid garbage bills, they're trying to catch up. And, I got a garbage bill. I owe $100 or something from past that I didn't know I owed. And my only question, and I mentioned this in fiscal court, I signed up as a, to comment. Was that, I don't mind I got a letter from fiscal court saying I owed this from unpaid garbage. I'm like, well, if my doctor sent me the same letter that I owed for whatever, they would have a list of the dates of service.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it would be nice, not necessary, but nice to know when that wasn't paid. Because it's just a blank bill that says you owe us this. And I'm like, well, I'd like to know when that was, just for my own information.
Right.
And not just a bill for X number of dollars.
I wondered if Salt River could track that. I don't know if they can go back that way.
Well, I'm not sure if Salt River tracks it or if it's now. And I think I wrote a little bit about it. Salt River is now collecting because I got a letter from the county and also a bill from Salt River for the unpaid garbage.
Okay, so they've set up a new system.
Yeah.
Going back to, let me give a little history.
Okay.
On I think it's important for those viewers that don't remember or weren't around at the time. The previous court, about 1992, one or two, I took over, maybe three, I took over in 94.
Right.
Passed mandatory garbage.
Okay. I didn't know if that was before you.
It was just slightly before me.
Okay.
And I'm not blaming the past administration at all.
No, it was
the prior administration, I think is what some people call it. And they sent out coupon books. The coupon books, it was an honor system of how you pay.
Right.
And the collections were horrible based on the households that were showing up on the census and so forth.
Right.
And I'm talking about a significant amount. So Larry Hicks and Nikki Rapier with Salt River Electric, we communicated and talked about putting the garbage bill on the electric Salt River bill. Of course, they served the majority of the county, but there were a few spots that KU served outside the city limits, several spots. So we identified those residents. And Salt River started sending out with their electric bill a line item for their garbage bills. Works great. There's not a better system that I could ever think of. And to Salt River's credit, they're not a collection agency.
Right.
And if you remember, we had discussions about this in the court years ago, that when somebody is delinquent on their electric bill and they go to pay on that electric bill, the garbage, there's a line item for garbage. If they make a partial payment, all that payment goes towards the electric side of it. So the garbage gets kicked down the road.
Right.
Okay, so over the years, just a little less than 1% of the garbage bills in the last 30 years have not been able to be collected. 1% out of about between $50 and $60 million collected in the 30 years. That most of those I was judge, and so we looked at analyzing, hiring a second person to help. Teresa in the office did a tremendous job. Not only was it average of 17,000 delinquent, it couldn't be. She would collect another 25 or 30 delinquents by herself. And she was doing occupational office, code enforcement office, and garbage. And so we looked at hiring someone else to do it. But you ever try to squeezing blood out of a turnip? It doesn't work well. And these people move. And to be honest with you, renters were a big problem for collections.
Right.
And I see the courts talking about possibly adding that to the tax bill. When I would object to that if I were a landlord, because you're taking somebody else's liabilities and making me to try to pay it, when in essence that service wasn't provided to me as a property owner.
Right.
I think that could be challenged in court.
Well, I think Magistrate Keith Metcalf was expressed his opposition to that because it's not his bill. If he's the landlord and owns several properties, he could be stuck as the landlord with a bill he's not responsible for. But
I'm pretty sure, I'm not an attorney, but I'm pretty sure the history showed that if that was ever done, you can scratch it off and don't have to pay it. Can't come after you. as a landlord.
Right.
So I would challenge that if I were a property owner with quite a bit of property.
Well,
You're assuming somebody else's bills. That's not right.
Well, I think that's Keith made that point. That it's not.
You could do that to numerous different
Sure.
things that are out there added to the landlords.
Well, even electric bills, utility bills, you could do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and if they could done it, they would have already done it. If the companies could have done it to the landlords, they would have already tried it, I would think, over the last 50 years, 75 years.
Right. But I guess I'm assuming now that Salt River is pursuing, delinquent bills or delinquent unpaid garbage bills, which is good.
And they did in the past.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then we got the county attorney involved.
Uh-huh.
And when you don't have a good address, we even experimented with a collection agency, and they practically gave up hope because the addresses that we had, they were invalid. They weren't good.
If you move a no forwarding address, you're stuck.
Yeah. Now I understand the county's talking about making a separate sheet where they have to fill out the same information that they do at the electric company.
Right.
I don't know if we're talking about putting a social security number on that, but you necessarily can't find somebody by using a social security number.
Right.
Not that I know of.
Right.
I'm curious as to how that would play out if it does play out. But that would be what I would call, as my conservative friends say, government overreach. Right, Jimmy?
You're right.
Yeah, that's way overreach. I love it when it comes back to home to the fiscal court that we have now is, the majority Republican. I can't imagine them doing that. I can't imagine them doing such a thing as to sticking me with a bill that I didn't incur.
Right. Well, I'm not a landlord anymore, but I never had to pay any former tenant's utility bill.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't know why it would be any different with the garbage collection
bill. Going back a little bit here, that Tim Sharp's the current director of Salt River Electric. He continued the contracts that Larry and Nikki had started,
right.
and he continued to work real hard with the fiscal court. In no way should Salt River be blamed for any of this. I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
And it's just a matter of how do you collect money when you don't have a current address? Because most of these people are moving. And there's more rental properties in Nelson County than most people think about.
Right.
In fact, I've got those numbers here. Let me see if I can find that real fast here, Jimmy. Yeah, your census will show how many units are owned and how many units are rental units. The county now has about 15.6% of the homes in Nelson County, or not homes, or units they call it on the census, that are rental. That's about 2,300 rental properties outside the city limits. The city actually has about almost 2,650. But they're in a condensed area.
Right.
About 55% of the city's units are owner occupied, and I can't remember what the counties was. I didn't check that part, but those numbers are available on the U.S. Census, and you'll get close. You won't get exact when you look at those. But it's a good way to find out how many units are rental and how many are owner occupied.
Right.
But the city's got a higher rate of renters.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, you just have apartment complexes that have to be on sewer, and the sewer's going to be in the city.
Right.
But the renters that move in and out are your biggest. It was our biggest headache then. I don't know, and there's going to be people that slip through the cracks no matter what you do. I don't know of any agency that has a 1% or less delinquency. Of course, the government can't write it off. It has to accumulate. It doesn't make sense. The county operated on a cash basis,
right,
as far as accounting goes, to a certain point. I think they modified it now, and you can't take that $17,000 a year and write it off and do anything with it.
Right.
What do you
So it just accumulates.
Just accumulates. So that made it even worse. That makes it even worse. And then with the higher rates now, I'm talking about a higher rate to, 35% in the last 2 years, maybe more than that. I didn't sit down and figure that out, but it's $20.61 I think now for my household garbage, which I tried to get raised from my more conservative fiscal court several times, and I asked for $1 for 3 years,
Right.
and we compromised on 50 cents.
Right.
And I knew it wasn't going to be enough, but it got us started, and now the courts jumped it up even more, and it's not very conservative when you do that. Right, Jimmy? Looking over, grinning at me.
Well, that's true.
But the service has to take care of itself.
Exactly.
And my courts at the time felt like that it was too much. The $1 was too much each. And I'll tell you something else that's changed. The county has a changed policy on reduced garbage fees.
Right.
We had a low to moderate income, mostly low income fee that was allow somebody to participate, but yet wouldn't. I think it was about, when I left, it was about $6 versus I think 15 or 16 when I left office. But it still allowed them to participate. It still allowed us that revenue to help pay for the landfill and the pickup.
Right. Well, every fiscal court meeting, there's always a discussion about one department or another needs equipment. And I know just from my coverage of fiscal court how much the garbage trucks, any sort of vehicle, and then equipment in the compactors, any sort of heavy equipment, the prices have just really gone up, and I think that's and you're right. I think the garbage is a service that needs to pay its own way.
Yes, always, and the landfill as well.
That's right. I usually, in my mind, I group them together, but there are separate. You've got the
separate
pickup,
entities.
Yeah, separate entities.
Separate entities.
Yeah.
Well, isn't the county contemplating now doing some placing recycling areas?
They got a grant from the state
to do that, and that should
bins.
cut down on the amount of garbage.
It will make a small difference. It's more importantly what the educational component of that is.
Right.
And somehow that the courts over the years has not valued that. And the selling point is that you read a lot of these towns that do recycling. You know where that stuff winds up? In the dump, in the landfill. There was an article the other day where a lady tracked her recyclables. I can't remember how she did it. And it wound up in the landfill.
No, I'm not surprised, but because I don't know what recyclables there are now that other than maybe cardboard, that really have any sort of market that they can. I don't know if glass or certain plastics.
Glass was always the hardest one to get rid of at that time. Cardboard was easy for several years because there was a insulation factory, I think, in Springfield somewhere that took tractor trailer and actually paid you for it. So that helped offset some of the cost of some of the other recyclables.
But they don't do it anymore?
I don't know. I've been out gone for 2 years. I don't know if they're still doing it or not.
Well, the court actually agreed at the meeting Tuesday to put out bids for I think a dozen recycling trailers. So I think and they mentioned the education component because it's you and I may not be as in tune to recycling as when they start talking about it in schools, and it's really that younger generation coming up that they really need to get to.
And the real bolts of it is that people will not recycle unless you start charging them for their garbage based on are you recycling it or not. That's what the big cities do. They give you so many cans, you pay for so many cans.
Right.
And after that, you have a recycling container. And if you need more garbage cans, you pay 2 cans, I think is what most cities do. So I see 5 and 6 cans out plenty of times in around the county. So you would be paying more.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, my wife and I are guilty of not getting the garbage out for a couple weeks in a row. So sometimes we'll end up with 4 cans out.
Yeah.
You know, but
my wife says I have OCD on
Yeah.
garbage. I have it keep everything bagged, and I put it out the night before, put a strap over so the raccoons won't get in it.
Put a what over it?
I put a bungee cord over the top of it where raccoons can't get in.
Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it was easier to keep up with the garbage when our son was living at home, because it was always his job.
His job to take down the
Yeah,
garbage down to
that
the road.
did make it easier for you, didn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, so now my wife and I do it when we think about it.
Well, all I know is that most of my garbage is recyclable. I mean, I have one small kitchen bag
Yeah.
for
By
the week.
yourself, you by
for the
yourself,
week,
yeah.
yeah. But I have a couple of plastic bins full of plastic and paper.
Paper.
Well, I'll tell
So-
you, Judge, when my daughter moved back from D.C. a couple of years ago, and she asked me about, of course, if she could get a burn barrel, and I'm like, you came from D.C. where you recycle everything, and you want a burn barrel? I said, we do have recycling. You have to take it to them, but you know. But they're talking about having the trailers scattered around the county.
You know, we had some of those
Yeah.
at one time, and people started dumping their garbage, and the recycling center we were hauling this merchandise to refused to take it, and then said, if we get one, you're going to start paying us. And they can't blame them.
No,
Yeah. Well, no.
Yeah.
because you don't want to make. Well, you know, that affects working conditions for the people.
Yeah.
That are trying.
You know,
to
your own garbage is one thing, but when you have to deal with somebody else's garbage, you know, if you're a worker, it's different.
Well, especially the intent is for recycling, not a catch-all for whatever else you need to throw away.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, I think, and I remember the debate about universal garbage, collection.
And before I became judge,
But I think there's no denying that it's benefited Nelson.
Oh,
County.
yes. Oh, yes, indeed. There's no doubt. I actually, when I ran against the prior judge, Judge Abel, I actually supported the mandatory garbage pickup. I found myself out on the campaign trail supporting him for that issue.
Well, you know, he had to make some tough decisions.
He did.
Just as you have over the years as well.
Yeah. It makes a difference when you're in that seat.
Yeah, I remember I looked up your campaign advertisements, and some of the stances you took then changed after you were in the driver's
They were
seat.
modified. They were modified.
Okay.
I took those out of the Standard and had them posted on the back of my door in my office for years. And one of them was building get more involved with recreation.
Right.
I got to check that one off. And the water line project, got to check that one off. But there were a few that had a couple of hiccups.
Well, you know, it's always different when you're in behind that desk.
Oh yeah.
And you have to have to see the realities of running county government.
But go back to the garbage delinquency. That will continue to rise. When you raise the rates now, instead of a $12 or $14 bill, somebody's delinquent on, when you go up to $20, I mean, you're going to see that compounded probably.
Right.
Now, I hope they have a better system. If there's got to be a better system. I don't know of one. We put a lot of thought into it. Brad and even Jim Lameau when he was there, and John Granville as well. And Matthew Height was involved as a county attorney. And Teresa, God love her, she worked her tail off and collected. And you didn't see the delinquents that she collected every year. Usually it was about 20 grand or so of delinquents. So there was more delinquents than the average of about $17,000 a year. There was actually more.
Well, I guess we'll now. I think the Salt River either updated their practices more recently, since this this issue came up, because when we've paid, I pay online all the time. You know, but if you were late, you didn't have the garbage bill didn't show up at that time because they're a utility, they need their money. And so they were more interested, I guess, and I can understand this, in collecting. If push came to shove, they want their electric bill paid because they can cut you off. You know, the garbage, they have no recourse. You know,
you can't cut them off. You know what happens? We thought about that. It sets out there.
Yeah.
And then guess what? The neighbors are calling. Dogs are in them.
Yeah.
It's clutter for our community.
Oh, yeah.
So the cost of that is worse than the delinquency.
Right.
And that was the way that I took it. And the delinquency, and it's happened before. Let me tell you, where people have moved out and leave the garbage out there. And my policy was with the garbage guys, pick it up. If we don't pick it up, the inmate's going to have to come get it. Scattered. It's going to be scattered by the raccoons and the dogs and so forth. And the community, we're a better community than that.
Yeah. Well, Judge, we need to stop and take a commercial break. You're listening to Bradford and Brooks and our very special studio guest, former Judge Executive Dean Watts. We're going to stop and get some messages in. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks, Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford, here with you until the top of the hour. And then stay tuned to WBRT for the best in state and local news. And our special guest today is former Judge Executive Dean Watts, kind of giving his thoughts on, just county government and giving a little history lesson, too, on things like the universal garbage collection that we've of course, I guess, how old was I when that went into effect? Probably 22, maybe 21. So, but anyway, it's good information. You know, sometimes learning the history of how things happen is so important to knowing, of helping
where you are today,
and where you're going.
Going forward,
yeah.
Yes.
Now, technology, we all deal with technology. My phone I have here is an iPhone 8, and I think there's currently selling, a 15?
Something like that.
My phone is horribly outdated, but it does the job, and it didn't cost $1,000 either. I mean, I could drop it in the sink and full of water, and probably go buy another one off eBay for $130. I have always had a problem carrying around something that expensive in my pocket, I'll tell you, the first expensive phone I ever got that cost more than $100, I end up with a case that was built like a tank. You could have bounced it off of anything and thrown it off a cliff, and it probably would have survived intact. This case isn't nearly as protective, but I'm risking less now than I used to. So,
sure.
Trying to keep costs under control, and I'll tell you for those of us who have old iPhones, the deciding factor on when you need to upgrade is when you can no longer update the operating system on the phone or install the app you want.
Yes.
It gets frustrating to get that message from the app store saying, "Sorry,
you're full."
Yeah, your phone is too old to add that. So, and that's usually when I upgrade, when I have to. But technology is something I think, it's a constant chase to try to stay up to date. And as I mentioned during the break, state of the art is a single point in time in most cases when you have computers or any technology, because it's aging immediately and is no longer state of the art in no time.
Of course, I asked Jimmy to bring this subject up just for the listeners because it was mentioned in the court meeting one day about the county was behind in technology as to where it should be. But I've been gone 2 years, and when I left, the technology we had at the time was more than adequate. Software was purchased for the building codes, the solid waste programs, as they were needed by the department heads. The software can be very, very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter what it cost, if they brought that to us, then the fiscal court at the time, we updated, upgraded. And if you go too far in advance on software and you say, well, I'm going to plan for this to happen, you can spend some money foolishly, and that technology will change in 12 to 18 months. Then you've spent, some of the software packages are $15,000 and $20,000 and $30,000.
Sure.
And so you spend money foolishly. And I just want to defend the court at the time. That's why we had a narrow window as to when we would upgrade, and it worked out fine. Upgrades are going to have to be made for the next 20 years if it keeps going. It has slowed down some,
Right.
but you'll have to upgrade as people write new software and do new things. That's
Right.
the world we live in today.
Well, I've always looked at at technology upgrades. Of course, what I do is fairly simple. I just have a cloud-based word processor that I use to do my writing on, and of course, I have to have some sort of photo editor, and then now into video editing. And I've got a fairly old desktop computer that I do most of my work on.
And you're comfortable with it.
Well, not only that, it still does everything I need it to.
Yes.
Now, it's a little slower than if I bought, a brand new expensive Dell or whatever brand. That might do it a little faster, but it's still adequate. And so, as long as it'll continue to meet my needs, I have more time than money, when it comes to waiting on it to complete a process.
Yes.
But it's still adequate, and I think that's...
And I think that's smart business. It is a business that you're running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And being conservative on that part is good. And that's kind of the way the approach that the fiscal court that I work with had. We get it as we need it, and make sure it's adequate for a period of time, and then you upgrade when necessary.
Right.
But the current administration had complained about technology and not being updated, upgraded over the years. I strongly disagree with that.
Well, and I think you have to also remember it's been 2 years, since you were there.
Right.
And
And
the
lots
court has
happened in
changed.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you run into, of course, the companies that sell the software, they upgrade it and change it, and they want to sell that again.
And then they want a monthly fee
Exactly.
for support. Because that software is not always perfect.
Right.
And that support you pay in monthly. All of a sudden you've got these fees coming out your ears.
Well, the software I used to be able to buy outright a few years back is now an annual subscription.
Yeah. Yes.
And that just burns me up. I have a version of Photoshop that's probably 8 or 10 years old, still on my computer, that I bought outright. And I finally upgraded to the subscription version, but it just rankles me every time that subscription comes up.
Okay.
Because it's not cheap. And it's like, and I've questioned, is it worth the extra, features and the new look to use that new software when my old version did everything I needed it to?
I see. So it's a matter of preference too.
Yeah. So anyway, but you can't run everything that way. But it's not that computer that I use, my old computer. It's not eating anything, and it costs me nothing to keep using it.
Well, I know we're getting close on time. We'll talk about the 2 amendments on the ballot this fall.
Yes.
Amendment number 1 and 2. One, I think, has to do with, there's already a law that says if you're not a citizen, you can't vote.
Right.
And I guess they want the Constitution to say that as well.
Right.
It's a feel-good.
Yeah.
It's a feel-good thing, doesn't it, affect
So we'll pass on that now that everybody makes their decision. Let's talk about the most controversial one, which would be Amendment number 2.
Right.
Of course, as a family that most of my family went through private schools, St. Joe, Bethlehem. The girls went to Bethlehem. When you don't understand everything, you say, well, why can't we use those tax dollars to paying school tax? Why can't I get some of that back? And it makes sense on the surface.
Right.
But be careful what you wish for. because I found as judge that when you get tax money involved, there are a lot of strings attached.
A lot of requirements.
And a lot of requirements. And then all of a sudden you get hooked into dependency on those funds to operate your schools, your private schools. And then all of a sudden you got to do things that go against your beliefs and or operating procedures. And then so you're hooked. And then you're dependent on those vouchers coming in. So there's two sides to that story.
Right.
And of course, the public schools are concerned about the money it would take away from the public school systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't know what that number would be. I don't know if anybody's come up with a number on that.
Right.
But be careful. Of course, we already had at county government. We already had. Transportation was paid for the private schools, St. Joe, Bethlehem, all the elementary schools, the Catholic schools, and Bluegrass Christian Academy.
Right.
And be careful. Just be careful.
Well, I know that came up a couple of meetings ago in the bills, and one of the magistrates asked, "Well, what's this?" and explained that's Proco school or transportation, and that's reimbursed by the state.
It hasn't always been reimbursed by the state.
Right.
And when Paul Patton was governor, he got it put into the budget. And at that time, I think it saved the county government about $125,000 to $140,000 or so dollars a year. It's like finding money on the street for a county government.
Sure.
And since then they've upgraded. They've added a little bit of money to it every so often, and so it's 100% reimbursed based on a percentage. A few years they had too many people applying for it and didn't have enough money to go around, so they prorated the percentage that you had got down.
Right.
But the transportation was an issue.
Right.
That's back starting in the 50s, I believe, Margie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So there is government money coming into the private schools, but not for tuition assistance.
Right. Well, Judge, I have to ask you, where do you stand on the amendment? Now, I'm kind of like you, my family. Now, my brother went to public school, Benny, but we went to St. Joe, and Bethlehem, or St. Joe Prep, my oldest brother. I'm very concerned about the idea of public money going to be used for private education.
Yeah.
And I think there's arguments on both sides, and I think, and I'm not sure anybody knows how much money could be siphoned away from the schools. Of course, the schools are paid on a per student in their average daily attendance.
Just to get it down to the county level here, there's, best of my memory, there's approximately about 1,000 students in the Catholic school systems here. Okay. I don't know exactly what Bluegrass has right now, but that's a lot of students. And if you take X number of dollars per year per student and transfer that money from the public side, it's quite a bit of money.
Well, and that doesn't mean that there'd be, I guess I'm assuming that, depending on how the legislation is written, that if you're a current private school student, that student could qualify to have money, voucher money or whatever coming from the public tax dollars to help support that education.
But if you'll notice that the Jefferson County Schools is offered a stipend for transportation now. They couldn't get enough bus drivers.
Right.
So that's a small way of and I'm sure the private schools are going to try to jump on that bandwagon as well.
Right. Right. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
You asked me. I'm still researching and analyzing the situation. On the surface, it sounds good as a Catholic family, but I would be concerned about the stipulations that come with that money.
Right.
Be awful concerned.
And the way it is written, it is an open-ended invitation for the General Assembly to spend tax dollars however they want to on private education. There are no guidelines. You're essentially giving them a blank check.
Well, and that's my concern, Margie. It's and I shouldn't say this because I think the world of our state representative and state senators, but as a group, I'm not real comfortable with handing them the ability to to write that blank check to do it the way that the majority sees fit. You know, I mean, it takes a lot of, and I'm also worried about the public schools. I think, you know, they may lose money, but their expenses don't go down any if they lost students.
Let's say this, that without the public schools, solid public school systems, you become a third, I'm going back in history.
Right.
We, in the turn of the century, we would become a third world country. And without that public education component of your communities.
Right. Right.
And that's why it needs to be supported. And if money from the state is cut off to the local school districts to keep on operating at the same level or a good level, the money is going to have to come from local taxpayers.
Yeah, and then I think we also have to remember
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, private schools aren't necessarily required to offer the same services. For example, special education and other things. But you know,
and they can pick and choose.
That could be you know, dealt with in how the legislation's created. We don't know yet, and the unknown is one of the hardest parts to deal with.
Constitutional amendments historically have failed.
Right.
Quite a few of them.
Right. Well, Dean, I want to thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's always great to see you and great to have you on.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Bradford and Brooks. Margie and I will be back next Wednesday, so please catch us next week. We'll have this, if our video worked as it should, we'll have this interview uploaded on YouTube and available on the Nelson County Gazette homepage. So until next week, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time.